Howdy folks, welcome back. This is a four-wheeler, or ATV, or quad, or whatever you want to call it. It's a Kawasaki Bayou 220, and it doesn't run, of course. It comes with a story. This machine belongs to a customer of my dad's, well, did belong to a customer of my dad's. He brought it to my dad because it wouldn't run. My dad did some basic troubleshooting with it, sprayed a little bit of ether or carburetor cleaner or something into the carburetor, hit the button and it fired up. He took the carburetor off to clean it, reinstalled the carburetor, went to push the button to start it, and the starter never worked again. It does have a pull start, so he pulled the pull starter, wouldn't run. Took the spark plug out, and now it has no spark. Basically, he narrowed it down to a problem with the electronic ignition system, but he wasn't able to figure out exactly what the problem was. For some reason, it now has no spark. Now, this machine has been badly eaten by mice. I'll show you the battery here in a minute. It's almost comical. So the wiring is basically a total write-off. That's probably the source of our problem. I don't know for sure. We're going to have to see if we can find a wiring diagram or kind of muscle our way through it. So long story short, my dad told the customer what he thought it would take to get this machine to run. The customer said, "That's 4 times what the machine is worth." My dad said, "You're right," and that's where they left it. Well, it sat at his shop over the winter, and I guess this spring my dad did some work on another machine he had, and they kind of traded the labor on the other machine for this machine. So then my dad owned it, and then I did some work for my dad, and then he paid me with this machine, so now I own it. So that's the roundabout story of how it got here. So it's my four-wheeler now, but it may actually just be my 4 tires and my lump of scrap metal. Tires are pretty good, everything else is pretty bad. So we'll take a tour of this sweet machine. It's got good tires, and that's basically the only thing about it that's good. I don't think the frame is actually bent, but everything else that attaches to the frame is either bent or broken. So all these racks are kind of bent and broken and missing bolts, and they've got hardware store bolts installed in some of them. I think there's a piece of plastic here that's missing. Whatever cable attaches to this brake lever is missing. This one's there. This is a Honda throttle lever that they've added onto it. Don't know where that came from. None of these buttons up here seem to work. They added this button for the starter and this kind of patch cord here. This is the rat's nest that is the wiring harness. That's a disaster. I do have the airbox for it, and I do have a seat. You can see all the plastic here has been broken and patched, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. The front fenders aren't too bad. This whole area around the seat's pretty bad. The rear fenders aren't too bad, but this rack at the back is, I don't know, there's something missing here. I think something was welded here and it broke off or something, I don't know. And all these brackets for this lower rack are loose. I think it does have a differential. This is 2-wheel drive only. 5-speed manual transmission, probably with a centrifugal clutch. It does have reverse, but that's about it. So yeah, I don't know how old this would be either, so maybe someone in the comments can tell me. But that's what it is, Kawasaki Bayou 220. So here's the rest of the plastic covers that came with the machine, and that's the air filter box. This is the air filter. You can see the mice have eaten all of the filter element completely off and just left the screen behind. There's the seat. The seat's been recovered, but looks pretty decent. They did a pretty good job, I think. There's no holes in it, so that'll work. But check out the battery. This is the battery that came in the machine. All of that damage is caused by mice. They ate the entire plastic case of this battery. I mean, there's just nothing left of it. Battery acid, I guess, kind of tastes sweet, and rodents love to chew on batteries, but this is probably the worst one I've ever seen. Pretty crazy. I think I have a video on my channel here where I fixed a van for a church, and the mice had eaten the battery on that thing too. But yeah, the mice got into the wiring harness and chewed it up as well, so that's probably where we're going to find our problem, is is at the teeth of a rodent. Okay, I found a wiring diagram. I think it's correct. I'm just going through trying to identify some of the components. So it looks like this right here is a starting relay. It's inside of a little boot. And that boot was full of water, so there's a good chance that doesn't work. Come on. Yeah, that thing right there is a relay. That would be this relay right here. Now this right here is the actual starter relay. So this must be a starter safety relay, and this is the actual starter relay. So that would be this one right here. And they bypassed this relay. See where they tapped in with these orange wires? And it runs right up to this push button on the dash panel here. So what must have happened is this relay must have failed, or it looks like there's a wire pulled out of the plug. So they just bypassed it with a direct switch into the starter solenoid there, or starter relay, which, you know, I guess that's fine. But I'd be pretty surprised if that thing works at all. Looks like it's all rusted and coming apart. And then this right here, I believe, is the diode and rectifier unit for the alternator. I'd be real surprised if that works. It's all potted and the epoxy's all coming out, so probably gonna need one of those, probably gonna need one of those, and probably gonna need one of those. But I don't think any of those things will keep it from running. So the ignition is some kind of a CDI electronic ignition system. So there's a crankshaft sensor, and then what they call the igniter, which must be a ignition module, and then it should have an actual coil somewhere. So if we look at the engine down here, so I think we'll probably find out these two wires here are for that crankshaft sensor. So I'm not sure what that is. Must be a magnetic type sensor. We should be able to scope that and see if it's working. Now up here in front of the handlebars is this little Denso unit. I'm guessing that's the igniter. So there should be a wiring harness, yeah, coming in the bottom there. So that should be our igniter. I don't know where the coil is, but it probably is down close to the spark plug. You see we got wires hanging out here through some kind of a fuse block. I don't know what that's about. Okay, quick test here on the safety relay for the starter. It's dead as a doornail. But there's nothing special about this relay, so we should just be able to replace it with a standard automotive relay instead of this special round package deal. So not a big deal. Well, let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. This looks complicated, but this is a very simple wiring diagram. Most of this stuff is just for lights. The actual stuff it needs to run is pretty minimal. So it looks like power comes in here to this starter relay. There's a 20 amp fuse built right into the relay. That's going to send power out on this white wire. The white wire comes up here to the ignition switch. That's the key switch on the side of the dash. Turn the key switch on, that powers up the brown wire. The brown wire goes over to this starter safety relay. That's this relay right here. Now the brown wire is the one that was pulled out of that plug. Plus this relay doesn't work, so this whole thing isn't going to work. So we'll just forget about that. The brown wire is also going to send power down to our switch panel here. So that's your light switch, your run stop switch, and your starter switch. That's all the stuff built into the left side of the handlebars. So you turn the switch to run. That's going to provide power to the start button. So when you push the start button in, that's going to provide power to the igniter, I guess. There must be a ignition bypass during starting. Maybe it has a hotter spark during starting or something like that. And then it's also going to power up the actual starter relay right here. So the only thing that this relay does is make sure that you have the neutral safety switch engaged before you can use the starter. So we can just bypass, we'll just connect the black to black, and we'll bypass this relay for now, and we should be able to use the button on the handlebars to power up this relay if it works. So let's try that first, see how we get along. Okay, here's our battery setup. So we'll use this automotive battery and a pair of massive jumper cables, and we'll connect that right to the battery cables on the machine, and then we'll just do one of these and hope we don't melt everything, because this is a whole lot more amps than what this little guy was ever intended to have. Okay, so far so good. Should be able to just jump black to black. Got lights. So let's see. That should be run. Or is that run? Wah, wah, wah. So I cleaned the battery cables, and now our scabbed on button here does work, and the starter motor does work, so that's good. We don't have to pull that apart. But we don't have anything up here, so gotta figure that out. Okay, so let's see. Key on. Should have power at this brown wire, and I do. So I should have power at one of these black wires too. Nothing. Alrighty, so we turn the ignition switch on. We know we got power here at this brown wire. We've also got the neutral safety switch on. So this is working, but somehow we're not getting power from here to here. And I want to trace it. Looks like it goes up through the run stop switch into the starter button. So here's our ignition module right here. Here's the cable that comes down from the switch pod right here on the handlebars. So there's a yellow, looks like a yellow and red, yellow with a red stripe wire. It must be this one right here that comes out of that switch. And if we have power here, then we can rule out the switch. Oh, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute, folks. What is that? Can you guys see that? Looks like a brown wire, and she is rubbed through. So I wonder if we have power there. Let's turn the key on. Yeah, we do. So maybe it's rubbed through, but it might still be working. Okay. So that may not be our there's your problem lady moment. Well, all right, let's fix that, and then we'll move on to testing this yellow with a red wire. Give you guys a little pro tip here. This utility knife blade is made for roofing. It's actually made for cutting shingles, but I find that it works very well for cutting these wiring harness sheathing without cutting into the wire below. What is this? What is this? Okay, I guess that's a factory splice. Wow, that is super cheesy wiring from the factory. I almost can't believe that. That's crazy. That's a factory splice from 1 wire to 2 wires. And all they did was wrap it with about 1/2 inch of electrical tape. Alright, well, we're going to have to fix that too. Okay, so longtime viewers of the channel will know I'm a big fan of these uninsulated butt connectors and then using shrink tube over top of it. I don't like soldering if I don't have to because I think it's kind of a pain. Anyway, we'll leave that until we know it's going to work, and then we'll bundle that up with some loom wrap. Okay, so I reinstalled the jumper wire here where our relay is supposed to go. Let's just see if we have power there now when we push the button. Okay, obviously we have power because now the starter works. So let's see if we have spark now. Also, the headlights now work. This little gizmo right here is a spark tester. Let's just see what it does. Nothing. Okay guys, we're getting somewhere, and it seems to jive with the diagnosis that my dad gave me of the electronic ignition having a problem. So we're back, I think, now to the point he was at when he was working on it originally. Okay guys, just poking around here. So here's our yellow with a red stripe. I pierced the wire. We have power coming out of the switch, so that's not the problem. However, this is the connector that plugs into the ignition module here, the igniter. And when I front probe that yellow with a red stripe, no power. So somewhere from here to here we're losing power, and there is a connector. I don't know where it is, but there is a connector, so we can probably try to isolate, split the harness there, but all that stuff's buried in here, so I may have to take this whole front plastic piece off. Alright, so this is the connector I was talking about, and you see we have power going through that. So somewhere between here and here we're losing it. So I decided to just pierce into that wire right before the connector, and guess what? We've got power there. And I tugged on this a little bit, and guess what? We got power there. So I hate that. Hate that. So I don't know if we have a bad crimp here or what's going on. I think we're going to go ahead and pull that connector apart and just see what we've got, because just pulling on it isn't going to do it. Well, I think it's going to be one of these. Well, this is the part of the video where I'm 100% certain that I'm crazy, because I don't really see any problems with this crimp. I mean, it looks pretty decent. The little weather pack element here popped out, but that's not that big of a deal. I don't know. I think I have the right crimper here for it. We'll give it a try anyway. It's getting a little rusty. Yeah, and we got power. All right, here we go. If we now have spark, we're good to go. Well, lucky, lucky. I hate this kind of stuff. I know I had no power there, and of course we had no spark. What did I change? I don't know if it's just a pin fitment issue or what the deal was. Alright, let's see if it'll run. I wonder what that was. Hold on to your butts. Wah, wah, wah. Oh yeah, she wants to go. It's not getting gas. Okay, let's pull the carb back off. Well, we're as clean as I can get it without the magical Musty One ultrasonic cleaner, which I do not have. Gotta do it the old-fashioned way. I found some specs online saying that the height of the float off the bottom of the bowl should be, off the bottom of the carb, should be around 21.8 millimeters. So it's pretty close. Close enough that I think it'll work fine. Put this little doohickey back on. Now this carburetor's had water in it. It's always difficult to clean that oxidation out from where they've had water in them, but it usually doesn't hurt a whole lot. Well, it runs. I think the slide's stuck in the carburetor. I gotta check that real quick, but we're on the right path. Okay, I had the slide installed backwards so it wouldn't go down. There's a key in the side of the slide that allows it to slide past a pin, and if you don't get it turned right, it's basically stuck at full throttle. So, makes it exciting. Let's see what it'll do now. Okay. Well, we got a minor fuel fire and a minor electrical fire, but it runs. Jeepers. Unfortunately, the battery cables shorted together, and it tried pretty hard to melt that one right there. The insulation was actually on fire. So now that it runs, I think we better dial back the sketchiness just a little bit. I think I'll go ahead and buy a battery and possibly a relay. And yeah, we'll get this little guy back on the road. Awesome. But we've got to make a small adjustment here. I thought we were done with this stinking thing, but we are not. See if I like it. If not, we'll give her the old hard goodbye. She's unstoppable, people. We created a monster.